For all of the great pros of 8th edition, there are a few major, or should I say, serious cons. I mean, in some sense, this is to be expected. After all, nothing is perfect. But one of the larger issues I have felt on the tabletop is that 8th edition has largely become a shooting edition. This shooty climate we are in seems to be largely the result of last year's FAQs, which, while were justified with regards to balancing the game system itself, negatively impacted melee via reserves. So, let's get into what's the deal with melee Deepstrike. The truth. Melee by 8th edition's nature is systematically worse than shooting. Here's what it comes down to. Both shooting and melee follow the same damage sequence, that being hit check, wound check, saving throw. But in that comparison, melee suffers from inferior range, the need to suffer overwatch, and the need to pass a charge distance check. On top of that, after your attacks are made, the enemy can fight back as well, plus the dire consequences of what happens if you fail your charge, assuming melee combat was your only method to generate value. Now, I'm not necessarily complaining that melee is less effective than shooting. Logically speaking, and thinking in general terms, that sounds quite correct. There are just way more hurdles to overcome with melee as a warfare option, rather than just shooting your enemy. The reason why melee via Deepstrike has such an appeal is because it effectively removes range as a hurdle for melee. It keeps your valuable tools safe, the concept being your melee unit can appear within charge distance, bearing their melee weapons, rather than walking towards their target getting shot. This ability to arrive unseen is a major factor that allows melee to be viable in a sci-fi setting with ranged weapons. But even before we got all these changes to reserves from last year's FAQs, consider how melee via Deepstrike functions. A melee-focused unit arriving from Deepstrike needs to be set up more than 9 inches away from any enemy units. This means that any melee dedicated unit that is deepstriking cannot generate any value unless it can get into the fight phase. And to do so requires that unit make a 9-inch charge, which isn't an easy die roll. Think of it this way, if we take a look at all the valued results produced by 2d6, that being 2 to 12, and fill this gauge in based on the value required, we can get a visual representation of the difficulty of that single die roll. Speaking averagely, making a 9-inch charge has a 27% chance success rate, assuming the unit does not have any available rules to allow a reroll on the charge. Let's refer to this as a level 1 charge rate. The likelihood you are going to make a 9-inch charge increases to 47 to 52% if the charging unit does have a reroll mechanic. Factions such as the Black Templars or Hive Fleet Behemoth, and war gear options such as the Icon of Wrath fall into this category. Although to reach the upper values of that percentage range, you may need to spend 1 CP on a command reroll. I'm going to refer to this percentage range as a level 2 charge rate. And then you have really rare abilities, only available to a few factions and often usable only once per charge phase at the cost of CP, allowing you to charge with 3 dice. Which brings your success rate for your 9-inch Deepstrike charge to approximately 74%. This will be our level 3 charge rate, and it is our gold standard. So now, with these stats broken down, you can see the problem. The vast majority of units trying to charge from reserves will only have a level 2 charge rate at the best. And if you're going to make a tactical play, why would you choose a tool that only has a 50% chance of working? The changes presented in last year's FAQs, restricting reserves to only being able to appear in Battle Round 2 makes sense to me from a game design / balance perspective, but it made melee via Deepstrike degrees worse than it already was. To illustrate my example, let's imagine this is pre-2018's FAQs, so we can Deepstrike Battle Round 1, and let's put ourselves on the back foot, having second turn. We've already established that most of the deepstriking units only have a level 2 charge rate, and level 2 charges will still most likely fail, which in our example, they do. So this is already a grim scenario. A unit you had with a specific job in mind essentially just shit the bed. The only silver lining is this is the bottom of Battle Round 1, meaning your opponent now has to dedicate their tools to this new target, which may alleviate pressure from your other units. But now shift this scenario to post-2018's FAQs, to the bottom of Battle Round 2. Now, your opponent has had 2 full activations without those melee Deepstrikers being on the board, and will have 3 full activations without that melee unit having any meaningful impact on the game. Changing reserves to appear in Battle Round 2 has essentially made melee deep strikers an auto-ignore, due to the statistical likelihood that they will fail their charge, and has increased the already severe consequences of a failed charge. And when you consider that this is the best metric melee has to exist within a system that also has ranged weapons as an option, it's quite clear that this is the reason why we have the shooty climate we do in 8th edition. Here's my conservative solution. We already have our gold standard charging method. I think similar to the prepared position stratagem, every faction should have a stratagem that will allow them to charge with 3 dice. Make it 2 CP so it's consistent with the cost of the Blood Angels equivalent Descent of Angels. Now you might be thinking, does this need to be a universal stratagem? Well, I'll answer that question with another question. What is the purpose of a well-designed stratagem? To offer additional abilities, opening up new tactical options, and to better guarantee desired effects that have tactical ramifications, which would otherwise be at the whim of dice. Everyone should be able to make a desperate charge happen should the situation call for it, not just Blood Angels or a single unit of Bloodletters. And, as far as this potentially causing Deepstrike spam to be a problem, well, it wouldn't be. Making it a stratagem ensures that it can only be used once per charge phase. And since reserves must be deployed before Battle Round 4, it only allows for 2 units to make a level 3 charge from reserves, which still isn't an exact guarantee, but it's far more valid. And in the case of Khorne Demons, sure, they have their banner as well, but they should probably have both tools. I mean, they are Khorne Demons. And that's it. I want to share this with you guys to get your thoughts and feelings on the issue and the solution I arrived upon. What do you guys think? It's an easy enough house rule to implement. So if you guys feel like trying that house rule out, or maybe notice something I've missed, or if you have your own suggestions, leave a comment below. As for me, I'm extremely eager to see how this house rule affects games in my local gaming group. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one.